I am so glad you joined us today. Unleashing Kingdom Voices is like my happy place, especially when I get to interview people I know or I got to get to know. This episode, by the way, is brought to you by Girl Power Alliance. It's a premier worldwide group that is for professional women who want to make a leveraged income by teaching and being involved in personal and professional development, training and coaching, speaking, and leadership. And in the same time, you're getting a couple of that yourself. Girl Power Alliance, I'll give you a free 24-hour access in the show notes of this episode. So it's so my honor and to bring up to you. Okay, I didn't do my thing. Let me do it. This is just us. Lynda is an entrepreneur, health advocate, and wellness ambassador. She educates and inspires people through stories of advocacy, healing, and proactive wellness to become the CEO of her own company, which I can't see it right now. Let's just please help me give a warm welcome to Lynda. Hey, Lynda.
Hey there. How are you?
So how do you say it again, the group you're CEO of?
Oh, natural expertise.
Natural expertise. So I
Yeah.
got to tell you about Lynda. Lynda and I went to the same conference and mastermind afterwards down in Dallas last October. And we became roommates. And right off from the first dinner we had that night, there was just a connection. And I was just telling Lynda off camera, I was like, as the conference went on, I'd look for you. And if I found you, it's like you were my landmine. And I'm okay. I'm right here. I feel uncomfortable. I believe it or not, I'm an introvert. And there's Lynda. And then last December, I went to a mastermind and she wasn't there. And I'm like, where's my landmark? Oh, she's not here. So I'm sure we're going to have fun because that's just who we are. Right, Lynda?
That's right.
So,
That's
Lynda,
right.
give us you've got some amazing backstories, but just give us a couple of backstories that really led you to this place. You have such a heart to see people well and to tell stories and really get in the forefront of people. What would be a backstory to all of that to lead into your business and such?
There are so many stories, and for sure, there were two pivotal stories in my childhood. One was when I was 8 years old, I was hit by a car and went temporarily blind and deaf.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I started to struggle academically. And ironically, I had an older sister who was mildly mentally handicapped, and she was in special education. And it was very eye-opening to see what it felt like to be an average student or to struggle. I wasn't great at taking tests. And so, it just took me a while to recover. Of course, this was in the 1970s because I'm not young. And how ironic that they looked at this not as a brain injury, but they looked at this that I was just in shock.
Wow.
Well, of course I was in shock. I was hit by a car. But the second situation that was really pivotal for me, I think it was really when I pronounced I was going to be responsible for my older sister. We were home one summer. Mom worked part-time, like a mile and a half away. And my older sister was 14, I was 12, and my younger sisters were 8 and 6. And my sister had started this, let me really paint this story. So when you're watching television in the 1970s, there was no remote. The lowest person on the totem pole or the person sitting closest to the TV was the one that changed the television. And for some reason, my older sister was sitting on the floor close to the TV, and we asked her to change the channel, and she didn't respond. And, we didn't know why. Come on, change the channel. And all of a sudden, her body stiffened up, and she started having convulsions. And I was 12. I didn't know what was happening. I sent my younger sisters to the neighbors, and my sister went into a full-blown, which I now know is a grand mal seizure.
Oh, geez.
And she definitely started to choke. She was foaming at the mouth, and I just instinctively rolled her over and saved her from choking to death.
Oh my.
And thankfully the ambulance came. My mom got there at the same time. And I remember sitting in the house alone and saying, I'm going to be responsible for her one day when I grow up. And I felt pretty ill-equipped as a 12-year-old, but that was kind of when I really started thinking more like an adult, I guess. I kind of missed a little bit of my childhood. Those were the two biggest pivotal situations. The third one, really, I've got several, but the next one,
Yeah.
my father was diagnosed with a terminal illness at the age of 53.
Oh, that's tough.
It was very rare. In fact, there were 3 experts in the country, and one of them happened to be in our city, which we were very lucky.
Okay.
But he really wanted to figure out a way to live as long as possible. He went to his doctor and he said, I need a partner. I need someone to help me, which it was not something that was in most people's vernacular or, frame of mind. Usually you go to the doctor, they say this, and you go, okay, you go with your pills, you go with your diagnosis, and you go home. And he said to my father, basically what I surmised to mean, don't let your diagnosis be your prognosis. And my dad, really had a little bit of pep in his step.
Mm.
And 3 days later, this man dropped dead of a heart attack in his car on the way to work. And my dad was devastated. And at the time I was, I think, in my late 20s. And I just said, no, Dad, like this guy could have dropped dead before he gave you that advice. He gave you that advice. That was a God thing. That was God, giving you a little window into how to live this. So he was given 6 to 18 months, and he not only surpassed that, he lived for 4 years. He was able to walk 2 of us down the aisle and, spend more time with us. So that was really, thinking I was going to be taking care of someone and realizing that you could be in control of the way you approach your health was kind of my education before I even went to college, or after I went to college, actually, with my father. But prior to that, those were the biggest examples. And then it basically led me to the way that I approached everything else after that time.
Yeah. Wow. So that really like jump started you into wanting to know more, and not just to know, but to help, right?
Well, to be honest with you, I was a little agitated with my role. I didn't really know, I had ideas and plans of what I thought I was going to be doing. I was, came home, right out of college, and I was working for the Pan Am Games, and, was very excited about the career I thought I was launching.
Okay.
And all of these situations just kept coming up. And I don't know at what point I finally realized, probably not too long ago, to be honest, I guess I was a slow learner, that God really had a different plan for me. So that, everything that I did I needed to learn some lessons along the way to be able to offer, advice and perspectives. Because now at the age of 59, I've walked my mother through 10 orthopedic surgeries. I've helped my son with a brain injury. My older sister, who I saved, unfortunately passed away from a pulmonary embolism. I've had found out I had a genetic blood clot disorder because of her. And so many of the lessons led me up to, my own health challenges that came as a result of all of the, the stress. So.
But I don't see a woman sitting there in stress. So you obviously have a foundation. How did the Lord play for you? How did it play out to help sustain you?
Well, I mean, growing up, my parents, we always went to church. Although like good Catholics, we fought on the way to church. There was only one bathroom with 4 girls. So, it was always a little confusing because, my mom was converted to Catholicism and didn't grow up with faith. And my dad was a devout Catholic. And so there were a couple of different messages that I got that, the Lord was mysterious and that you just did faith in action. It wasn't a lot of discussion. So there wasn't a lot of I didn't have a lot of Bible knowledge.
Okay.
I just knew that I could pray and I could have a conversation. And so, watching
Can I say something right there?
Yeah.
That in itself is the basis of relationship. Instead of anything jumping through hoops, religion, performance, you just spoke so beautifully how anyone could get started. in this thing called Christianity. I like to say in this thing called Kingdom of God. So that's beautiful. Thank you for
Well,
sharing it that way.
I think we overcomplicate things, and we've lost our way, I think, with organized religion.
Yeah.
I think there's like it's sort of like the middleman
Yeah.
between you and God, and you really can, like in business and in spirituality, you really can go around the middleman.
Yeah.
I think faith is important in communion with other people. I think
Yeah.
that's what really makes feeling part of a faith valuable. But I also
Yes.
think that without the personal relationship, it's definitely just a place to go, right?
Wow.
But
Yeah.
it does give you the time when you're there to process and think about it. And I did. As soon as I left college, I started going to all kinds of different churches. I
Yeah.
did, so many different things to just see where my heart would land. I was open.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Did
yeah,
that relationship, how did that help you deal with so many? I mean, were having setbacks right up until I met you on the phone. I think, was it your son or so? How is that your rock?
I can't do anything without it. And
Hmm.
what I love about faith is that, I wasted a lot of years talking to people. And I even say talking about people
Hmm.
because I used to think, oh, well, I'm a verbal processor and I process things by talking, right? Well,
Okay.
what I did was I created my own middleman
Oh, wow.
that kept me disconnected from the Lord.
Wow.
And that was a huge insight that I gained.
For sure.
Probably not until my later adult years. Like
Wow.
I'm not old, but I'm not young. But it definitely took me a long time to really understand that the way that I was trying to find my way was getting in the way, right? Like just trying to really grasp what does faith look like. And I always prayed, but it's sort of like that whole, like when you pray and then you go, okay, thanks God, I'll take that back. I like to worry about that some more. I'd like to go over here and chat
Yeah.
about it with 3 other people and get
Wow.
their take and their opinion. And then you're deluded on what God's
Wow.
really saying to you.
We've all been there. That's
Yeah.
and I think sometimes in growing in a relationship with God, you got to come to places where, okay, I'm learning to really give this to you now, God, and I'm not going to rehash it with anyone else. Okay, I really got. Hey, so let me
Yeah.
ask you something. I
Right.
don't know if I've asked you this before, but
Yeah.
this had to be a mental strain. I mean, we're talking trauma. How have you been able to get through some of that, the mental strain of all of this?
Well, I mean, I think for years I distracted myself with all kinds of different things. I learned meditation, I read a lot of
Okay.
books,
Yeah.
I did all the things that sort of went all the way around where I knew I needed to be, but I still kept doing them to try to figure
Yeah.
it out. But in the end, like when my son had a brain injury,
Mm.
I was waking up in the middle of the night and I immediately went to prayer. I
Oh,
immediately
yes.
just journaled and prayed, and, I would fall asleep reading the Bible.
Oh, thank God.
And
Yes.
so, those things sustain you. And then when you really surrender,
Yeah.
that's where that's where things really start to line up, where you start to go, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is how I'm supposed to get the
Mm.
answers, right? You
Yeah.
can't, the way that I had been going about it was working sometimes, but again, it was just me going, okay, thanks God, I appreciate your advice. Let's go over here and
Yeah.
try visual
Surrender.
things. Yeah.
Surrender, like, that's at the core of everything. I remember a month or 2 ago, I was thinking about my business and thinking about stuff, and I just felt like that tiny voice, You're trying to control all this." I said, "Yeah, I
Mhm.
am, aren't I?" He says, "Will you please surrender it?" "Okay, I'll surrender it." The timetable, the what, and it's not easy. So if you're listening,
No.
you're like, "Oh, maybe God's talking to you that you're trying to control too many things." And, when you surrender, you're surrendering into the hands of God if you have a relationship with Him. If you don't, ask Him into your heart and watch God do things really exceedingly abundantly more than you could ever imagine. But I appreciate you bring that because that's
Yeah.
a tough one sometimes. And I'm the same way. Okay, I surrender that. No, I'm going to go over here, worry. So, with your son, where is he now with all that?
I mean, he's fine. And the reason
Okay.
he's fine is because through that process, let me just paint the story a little bit. He had a pretty significant concussion in 7th grade, and they had already been trained on concussion protocol. It was for junior high football.
Okay.
And they decided they knew better. And so they
Ooh.
didn't do the coaches, and they didn't do the concussion protocol. So he had no baseline. So he got hit so hard that he vomited and sat on the sideline dazed, which is pretty much a severe concussion, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't say anything. They just sort of mentioned, "Oh, he got hit kind of hard today. Ha ha ha." Like it was
Ooh.
no big deal. The coaches said that. And
Mm.
so took him home, and he had headaches for
Oh,
days.
Jesus, help him.
And so he was in and out of sports most of 7th grade year, like, played. He was, I think that because he had no concussion protocol, he was back to playing sports and pretty much
Ooh.
back to school fairly quickly.
Oh.
And so what happens is if you don't heal those symptoms, they continue on. So he got hit just one more time too many in 8th grade by a kid who just pushed him against the wall, and he hit his head.
Ah.
And so we took him to a doctor who happened to be our local professional sports football team's coach who did the concussion protocol. He was a retired neurologist. So I felt pretty comfortable with that referral. And he said out of sports all of 8th grade year. Well, I was fine with that. But the strain and the stress, and then parents started making fun of us, and
Oh, dear.
the staff and the teachers really made it difficult. So here I was getting pressure from them, getting squeezed by my son, who was devastated every time he didn't get cleared, which I knew he wasn't going to get cleared the whole year. And I think he knew, but I think he kept holding out hope that he would get that. So I was getting it from all sides. So when I was praying, I was asking for resources, and I started finding some things, and I found this thing called a D2 machine, and it's a former pro player was using it with his grandson at some facility out east. And I was like, well, that's really fascinating. I prayed, let it go. And then I was sitting at a game with my daughter, and somebody said, "Hey, Lynda, thought of you." And she gave me this referral. And so we went to see this guy, and he was in charge of all the race car drivers. Like he started personal training for IndyCar drivers. And he started with Roger Penske. So he was like, great. And he had a D2 machine. But I thought I better check with the doctor. So I went back to the doctor, and the doctor threw the folder across the room and said, he doesn't present with vestibular, blah, 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 whatever he said. And so I knew immediately that we were onto something. So I fired him mentally, and then went back to this guy and said, okay, I can't sign up and do this until I get some medical perspective. So he sent me to his friend who was head of all neurology for the University of Cincinnati.
Nice.
My son was evaluated. It turned out he had no brain damage. He had no vision damage. He had eye muscle weakness. And so what happens with eye muscle weakness is 95% of processing starts in the eyes.
Ooh.
So if you have a muscle that's off in your head, from your eyes to your brain, the information is slower. It doesn't get to your head. So he recommended the D2 machine and some other vestibular exercises, convergence, divergence. Anyway, long story short, we had been doing it about 2 months at this point, and he goes, "Come in here. I want you to see this." The guy that works with the race car drivers. And he said, "Hey, look at this." And on the leaderboard was my son, Scott Dixon, Dario Franchitti, like all of the top IndyCar drivers. And my son was beating them on this particular machine.
Wow.
And that year, Scott Dixon was really trying to improve his game. And he said, "All right, who's this guy drive for?" The guy said, "Oh, man, you're getting punked by a 13-year-old.
I love it. That's so funny.
But,
who's this guy drive for?
Yeah. And so
does that improve? Does that machine?
He healed because he worked on that convergence, divergence. He was out of sports. But he was able to hit, by the spring, he was able to hit a 90-mile-an-hour fastball on baseball summer workouts or whatever. So, or by the spring workouts. So it really was incredible. Returning, fully healed was much better than the pressure. And so that's what happens. God is your safety net. And he was my rock during that whole time, because I literally, I mean, I was dealing with pressure from parents, pressure from teachers.
Mm.
And then my son, he was angry. You know, he
Yeah.
didn't understand. He was wanted to play sports
Yeah.
and you know, we were getting ostracized. So there was pressure on all sides, but I knew God had my back. So then my prayers and then seeing them all lay out on the resources and the doors that opened, that's
That's
when you really know
beautiful.
you've got to lean in
Yeah.
and trust him and he's got your back.
That's so good. And your
Yeah.
son is fine now?
He's totally fine. Yeah.
Oh,
Went
praise
to
God.
college, did great. So
What a testimony there.
so
Wow.
many of those, like one of the stories I wanted to share with you, because we talked about my sister
Yes.
when she passed away unexpectedly. Um, we were trying to make all the arrangements and going through all the things, and my one sister volunteered to go to um, a flower shop to get a umbrella table for my mom's patio because we were thinking,
Okay.
oh, the afternoon sun, so blah blah blah. Well, this particular place had like sunlights in it,
Uh-huh.
and there was a beam of sun just pouring down on this
Ooh.
gorgeous, she said, gigantic orange mum,
Oh, wow.
just gigantic. And she was drawn to it and she didn't know why. And she walked over to it because I was praying about doing a eulogy for my sister. That's what led to
Mm.
this story. And I didn't know, how to go about this.
Yeah.
And my sister walked over and flipped the card over on the mum, thinking she'd find out what the name of the mum was. Well, the name of the mum was The Beauty of Cheryl, which is
Oh.
what my sister's name was.
Oh my goodness.
And so, then being able to explain my sister's life in a eulogy
Oh.
entitled The Beauty of Cheryl
Mm.
was a gift. Now, the ironic part about that is I decided we bought them, we bought that mom. We decided we wanted to buy them and plant them at our house, right?
Okay.
So this was in the fall. So this would have been a full year later. And I called around. I called growers on the West Coast. I called growers on the East Coast.
You're
I
kidding
called
me.
growers in the South, and they'd never heard of the Beauty of Cheryl.
Oh
Nobody.
my goodness. Oh
Nobody.
my goodness.
Like and then when I went back to the place that ordered it originally, she said, "Well, I don't order it by the name. I order it by the color." I could never find it again. And I
Wow.
just decided that was really just a gift from God
God
to,
just snuck in there with his angels and like, that
yeah,
is a beautiful story.
yeah,
That is incredible. That
yeah.
just shows you how far God will go
I know.
to speak to you. And I
Yeah.
say this to anyone listening, don't be surprised how it's not going to be your conventional religious way, how he wants to speak to you and tell you how he loves you. And sometimes he does it in our own language, like what you like, boom, he shows up. That is incredible. You never found it. Someone listening, if you know where that is,
Yeah,
I'm
right.
going to give you Linda's the information. Please tell her because I'm sure she would still like it.
That would be amazing.
So
Yeah, we
let's talk.
couldn't
Let's
believe it.
talk business. You're CEO of your own company. What's your company name again?
Natural expertise.
And now with balancing so many things, how
Sure.
do you find or maybe you're still finding ways to market that? I mean, I know your stories are probably the best way to market, but have you thought of different ideas of how to do that?
Well, I just really felt called to do this
Yeah.
year in the last year. So it's really
Okay.
been a function of, getting out and telling more of my stories
Yes.
because I really do think that, well, part of it, the story that I haven't shared is that I've struggled with, I had 11 years of all kinds of random illnesses and
Wow.
autoimmune diseases and so forth. And because I believe in of the prayer that I was healed of those as well, I
Mm.
literally refused 4 major surgeries and refused 4 prescription medications
Wow. That's a
and still
testimony.
healed in spite of it. So I
Yeah.
really believe that it's a reminder to everyone that, our bodies were designed to heal themselves, right? Like
Amen. So good.
we need some additional modalities from time to time.
Sure.
We're not going to deny that doctors are
Yeah.
needed. I'm not going to deny that, nurses or even medicines are
Or
needed.
even medicine. Yeah.
But I think that there is some part where when you partner with God and you're healing, that you have the ability to see how God can
Mm,
work. And
mm.
even if it's not healing your body, at least pointing you to the people and the resources
Yeah,
that you need to do that. So I'm really in the process of constructing how I want to do that and what that looks like. I'm not sure yet. I'm just
sure.
trusting the
Right.
process to see where it goes. But definitely
And
um
I understand that because
progress.
sometimes you got to process who am I going to help with this? Linda's a walking, I mean, I don't know, encyclopedia. She's a walking answer solution. So it's almost like, okay, which one are we going to pick? Linda and I are also coached by the same people, Chris Winfield and Jen Gottlieb, at least for one mastermind. And, the idea of being able to really craft your message. And Jen's all about being seen, and Chris is all about using AI. So we got like a 1-2 punch there. And it helps narrow down exactly where am I going to go. And I understand that, what you're saying,
Yeah.
because before I came to the mastermind, I was a jack of all trades. I wasn't dialed down on one thing that I was really needed to do. Well, I'm passionate about podcasting. So I used the skills and I made a podcasting made easy 101 with AI course. And then I'm like, well, people need to just know the basics of AI. So that I'm just giving you that as an example of, you got to narrow it down. But I know Linda's heart and my heart, we want to find solutions. We want to find extra, what we may think are ordinary, but they do become the extraordinary solutions to other people's pain points. And I really appreciate you, Lynda, because I really see that in your heart. You've got so much knowledge. I know, I think one night we were talking in the motel, and I'm like, you are just a walking medical answer. but to be able to get that down, but if I'd say anything, tell your stories. Tell your
Yeah.
stories. Because the story of your son, even the story of your sister, your story. I think people are more interested in that story than anything else. And, I feel honored that you shared some really tender stories right here. And I think that I pray that this is like really encourages you that you're valuable, Linda, and you are worthy and you are more than enough. You're called to really speak. And I appreciate you speaking here on the Kingdom, Unleashing Kingdom Voices. I changed the name. So it used to be the Kingdom Mentor podcast. So I want to ask you one final word for someone,
Sure.
and they are in a whirlwind of medical. They're a Christian, they know Jesus, okay? But they're in a whirlwind of a medical situation. It might be mental, it might be physical. I think of those two as the most. But what words of wisdom? And let me say something, because I want to say this on you, because you are so valuable. Because you didn't stuff any of the stuff you went through, you have brought forth insight and wisdom for us. And that it's not just insight and wisdom, but you have the ability to bring transformation because you faced all these things. So, with that being said,
Hmm.
what advice would you give on someone really, they got either mental or physical? Well, what advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, I always say, and thank you for that. That was very, very sweet of you. I think that the important thing to know is, from my standpoint, I've been through a lot. I have a lot of knowledge, but I also know that I am, not a medical practitioner. I'm
Okay.
not licensed in any form of health, but I'm the evidence. And I'm the
Mm,
evidence that with God you can heal. So my advice would be, advocating is it's a sport. I've
wow.
decided,
See it.
like you really have to, you know, the few things I would recommend right off the bat, you've got to document and write down all of your symptoms. You've got
Good.
to do it over time, not just
Okay.
one day. You've got to document over time. And then the second thing you really, really need to do is you need to print out a list of questions and start researching,
Mm,
start looking, start talking to people. It's not always comfortable. Sometimes you'll see someone post something, reach out to them and ask them questions.
yeah.
And then, as my dad did, making your doctor your partner,
Mm,
go informed. Go with
wow.
as much information as you can, because they're going to give you as little time as they can to make sure they can get through their day, because they've got malpractice
Okay. Okay.
insurance and they've got all kinds of different things. So they're going to need that extra incentive for you to keep their attention, and that is to be prepared. And
Excellent.
then The fourth thing I will say is be willing to look for outside solutions.
Okay.
Take the information under advisement. Thank you so much for your information. If it
Okay.
doesn't resonate, if it doesn't feel good, pray about it. And if that's not right, maybe it's the wrong physician. Maybe it's the wrong healing path.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's powerful. I hope you wrote that down. Those who are listening, or if you're listening on the podcast, pause that. That's value of wisdom coming from someone who's she's walked the talk. She's not just telling you what to do. So, wow. So are you going to use any AI, or have you used any AI yet?
I have been. I've
Okay.
got a lot of different projects on AI right now. Like I think
Great.
I have 6 tabs open.
Nice. I love it. I got to talk AI because that's part of my business, and that's what we're learning together. So, I
Yes.
just encourage you, reach out. You can reach out to me. I've got 2 courses. I got some webinars coming up just to introduce something that it's like this. It's like some people are not sure of it. It's like, okay, this is a tool. It's a pen. It can do good things, right, and it can do evil things. But wouldn't it be great, Lynda, if we get this tool into the right hands that can really help people, bring solutions, and free up some moms who are working that can spend more time with their kids because AI is taking care of it. Now, we don't mean copy and paste. We do mean train AI to know your voice, train AI to know your audience. I mean, it's not just a matter of, okay, I'm going to open it up and No, there are specific ways for it to train your voice, specific ways to find your ideal audience. So I always use that caution because they think it's the answer. Well, it is the answer, but you got to do a little work in understanding how to make the answer. So thanks for letting me have that free commercial on AI.
Yeah, no, it's great. And anybody that's listening should work with you for sure.
Well, you know why I'm so passionate? It's like
Yes.
this podcast. I get to share voices. um, AI, and I love video. I get to share my voice because I often believe, Lynda, that there are women and men who are they're trapped feeling voiceless because of the trauma they've gone through, maybe a mental sickness, maybe a marriage, and they're trapped. They feel voiceless, but they can discover transformation
Yeah.
by listening to people like you who are sharing about answers, but really it comes from the core of your identity. And then you speak, Lynda, you're speaking to the person you once were.
Yeah.
That's, to me, is my heart. If you behind AI, I mean, I could talk about AI, but you really want to know what our heart is. We want to see people like you be able to live the life abundant that Jesus promised. And if you don't know Jesus, I encourage you to draw near to him because he will draw near to you, it says in the word. I've never done this, but I think people know I'm a Christian. But I feel like someone's listening and they're listening for the medical reasons, but they don't know our physician, Jesus, Lynda. So we just invite you to DM us and we'll share more about what it means to be a kingdom living Christian. I say kingdom. You know why I say kingdom? Let me share a story. So one morning I was getting up and I was struggling, and all of a sudden I sat in my chair. I'm coming around kingdom, folks. And Lynda, I felt old. I said, I'm really struggling with the 60. I'm 60 years old, and I like in 20 years I'm going to be 80. And then I had regret, and oh my gosh, that marriage really stuffed me down. Oh my gosh, well, who's going to take care of me? And God met me right there. Everything I read had to do with the kingdom, but the number one thing was in Colossians. It says he rescued us from the dominion of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of light of Jesus. Kingdom. So God's like, after the end of the time with him, he's like, Theresa, your kingdom now. You don't wait to die to get into the kingdom of God. Sure, your kingdom has some aches and you're 60 years old, but that doesn't end. The kingdom continues. I don't know if that helps anyone, but I wasn't planning on sharing that, but
Beautiful.
that's what Lynda's about, is the kingdom, though. And if you need and you would like, I think God can tug on you. We don't beat you over because we believe God's kindness leads us to repentance. So God's kindness is extended towards you, listener, or if you're listening on live or you're listening on this podcast. And he's so faithful. Look at the faithfulness of God in Lynda's stories, her testimonies. I mean, look at the faithfulness of God in her son's story.
Amen.
Wow. Lynda, keep talking. Keep sharing, sister. And I'm so honored to have you on my podcast to really have real down to earth conversations, just like we did that first night at dinner. I was just like eating, like, this is amazing, her stories.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for inviting me to
Oh,
share
God's so
with your
cool how he
audience.
connects us. So my
Yes.
doors are opening. They're getting excited. So Lynda, thank you so much. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, hey, thanks so much for listening to Unleashing Kingdom Voices. We invite you to, hey, we share a review, not for a pat on the back, but for so that our podcast can go into the right channels. Write a review. Maybe you know someone who's really struggling with their health. Please, please share this podcast and look up Lynda in the show notes on about her or how you get. What is the best way to contact you, by the way?
Instagram at Lynda Thies.
At
Yeah.
Lynda Thies. Thank you. I forgot to
Yes.
ask you that. And that's the same for me. Instagram, instant message, DM. I think
Yep.
we're pretty ready to say, hey, here we are. So please do that. And hey, I appreciate you listening. And we'll talk to you in the next episode of Unleashing